Well, we're certainly in the depths of summer here. Classic pattern of showers developing across the southeast early this afternoon, and a little bit unusual area of showers in California, and that's probably the remnants of Tropical Storm Alita moving on shore. Let's run the animation back. We'll go backwards in time, do the time warp, go back to 3 a.m. yesterday. You can see that MCS activity there in Arkansas, and we run that through the day yesterday, and there's the progression of patterns. A few MCSs out there in the Central Plains, another one developing near Wichita down to Tulsa, and that dies off pretty quickly. We run that through one more time. Another MCS up there in the Minneapolis area last night, and that's pretty much gone at this time. The remnants drifting over Lake Michigan. Here's this morning's upper air analysis at 250 millibars. This is about 34,000 feet. And what we're seeing is lots of westerlies across the U.S., polar jet up there in the northeastern Pacific, and then coming on shore around Seattle, then curving up into Saskatchewan. Looks like another segment up there in Quebec up to Labrador. And of course we had some very warm weather, almost 80 degrees there along the Labrador coast. And how about that subtropical high? Where's the center of that? Well, the observed data, this is all observed data, this is from radiosondes. Looks like we have a anticyclonic circulation still south of Douglas. Yesterday we had another center over southern Alabama. Looks like that has shifted a bit. Maybe that has opened up into an open wave, kind of like that. And that's all part of this large high over northwest Mexico. So that's putting Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas in northwesterly flow. And anytime we have northwesterly flow with a humid air mass at the surface, this tends to bring a little bit of cold air advection southward, and that destabilizes the atmosphere. And it also produces shear vectors that help move storms towards the southeast into the more of a direct trajectory into the moist air. So you end up with stronger storm inflow vectors and better organization. And that's what's been happening with those MCS clusters that have developed through this area over the past couple of days. Now, one thing that you might notice off to the right, a couple of plots out in the Pacific. Do we have radiosonde data out there? No, back in the 60s we actually did. There were some ship platforms out here that helped fill in some of the gaps. Of course, budget cuts got rid of that, but now we're using airplanes. You can see United Airlines 1092. That's an airline flight on all these. Let me move this over so you can see better. And this is Hawaii right here, the Hawaiian Islands. And this is all the same airline flight moving across the Pacific towards, looks like San Francisco. And sure enough, we find that flight on FlightAware. United 1092 had arrived 2 hours 45 minutes ago from Kona to San Francisco, and provided the models with some good initialization data across the eastern Pacific. Our first glance at the surface chart using Canada's surface analysis. This gives us kind of a basic look at what's happening. You can see the weather's dominated by a 1027 millibar high over Hudson Bay. So that's going to be pushing some cold air southward and reinforcing that front in the Maritimes. Canada has not really analyzed any of the U.S. fronts. We'll fill that in on our own, but I would bet there's probably one down in this area, maybe. We'll have to look at the data, and possibly another up in the Dakotas. Very well organized frontal system up in Canada. We can see a baroclinic zone right there over Manitoba, and we would expect to find the jets running about like that. And thinking back to that upper air analysis, I was saying Seattle to Saskatchewan, I can use that verbal memory of what I said and take that and plot it. And that kind of gives me some reinforcement. and some consistency of all the charts. So we're gradually starting to build that up. And we expect to find that jet very close to the baroclinic zone, especially that triple point right there. That's where the next frontal wave is likely to develop. This is old news up here. This is an old occlusion, and we have the trough of warm air aloft, which corresponds to the deeper warm air along the occluded front. Across the southwestern U.S., looks like we have a frontal system coming together in the panhandles. Now, I'm not really too sure what the origin of that is. It could be that there's increasing upper level flow that's producing some lee side troughing and maybe bringing some baroclinic development together. This air mass here, certainly it's probably originated from some of these thunderstorm clusters, and maybe there's enough depth to that cold air to form a sort of cold air mass. I think that's what we're seeing, especially here where you see the dew points are kind of elevated at Dalhart and Guyman. And that contrasts pretty sharply with this 8-degree dew point at Trinidad, or Raton, actually. Now, I missed this 61-degree dew point. That's pretty high there in Colorado Springs, so I might bring this dry line feature a little bit off that way and maybe kind of, I don't know, I'm not too sure what to do with that in New Mexico, but there's certainly a strong dew point gradient between those two stations. And we do see an outflow boundary there from Alexandria up to Tyler, Texas, and that's probably representing some cold air that's kind of in place, and it's kind of, you can see that kind of segues into that warm front, so this is likely all the same air mass here. And there's the southwestern U.S., very impressive little transverse banding right there, north of the front, and that kind of flat pancaked, rippled, or rolled appearance, that should clue you in that you're back in behind a front, and that's definitely the case up in that region. Out in Texas, not much of a low cloud field at this hour, even afternoon, not breaking out much cumulus, so it is a dry air mass. And then we go west, and it's a very similar problem. We do have the monsoon still in New Mexico, not much sign of it in Arizona, so we're going to see mostly development up on the mountains. And there come the remnants of Tropical Storm Alita. It's not a tropical storm anymore. In fact, it was a hurricane earlier, but now we've got mostly mid and upper level debris. We'll try to take a sample of a sounding in that region and see what the air mass looks like, and that should show you that most of the moisture effects are in the mid and upper levels. So here we got California, and it's very important not to set the forecast sounding in the middle of a precipitation area. In fact, if I do that, let's do that and see what happens. And you'll see that you're pretty much smack within the shower. Very unstable layer right here. This is an inverted V, so this kind of setup does tell you that you're in the middle of a convective core. High omegas. So you don't want to use this. This is going to be kind of distorted and affected heavily by latent heat. So we'll go around that out to, let's say, out around Vandenberg Air Force Base. This should give us a better look at the air mass. And it's kind of similar. The lapse rate's not as steep, and it has not developed showers. And this shows you, there's dry air below about 8,000 feet. 700 millibars, remember that's about 10,000 feet, about 3 kilometers. Just to tell you how I convert this over easily, I look at that 700 line, and I think of that as the 10,000 foot line. So I can easily, convert that with the surface line. And that gives me about 8,000 feet here for the base of the moisture. And above that, the green showing lots of moisture extending up to about 25 to 30,000 feet. So you're going to be seeing a lot of cirrus and altostratus bands, altocumulus, all that stuff. And then down the lower levels, it's almost like nothing has really changed. I can see the marine layer right there, but that's pretty common for this time of year. Then we'll go inland to the deserts. Let's go out towards the riverside. In fact, we've got Rancho Alfon out there in Crestline, one of our regular viewers, and this is going to be pretty close to him. And again, it's showing the mid-level clouds there with dry air in the lower levels, 58 dew point or 50 degree dew point, tapering off to about 30 at about 6,000 feet. So you're not going to get any surface-based showers out of this. You will get elevated showers if you have steep enough lapse rates. But the question is, will it reach the surface with all that dry air? You're going to be seeing a lot of virga. And even if you don't get rain, it can be capable of producing some cool downdrafts and cooling the lower levels a little bit through wet bulbing. All right, the northwest U.S. Looks like we have some upper air energy across Idaho and Montana this afternoon, and some cumulus about to get going, convection in the mountains east of Yellowstone. The upper level charts showing that strong upper level flow supporting these polar front systems across the northwest U.S. And one wave there in Idaho looks pretty new, and then this other that we've been looking at for a while in the Dakotas. The northeast U.S. under the influence of that large high over the Hudson Bay region, producing a very weak northerly flow. Not enough to really change the air mass over. We can certainly see lots of 80s in New York and Pennsylvania. But it is reducing the dew points a bit down into the lower 60s. And here's our new frontal system in the Dakotas. We should see rain chances in Minnesota and the western Great Lakes over the next day or two. And we got this dry line running from about Pierre down to central Colorado with 70s dew points out ahead of it. So it does appear we have a chance for storms in that area. And there's the SPC forecast. Looks like this enhanced risk out ahead of the warm front in the surface system. And this other one here, I don't see anything in the data that suggests imminent thunderstorms, but maybe something will be shaping up later this evening. Maybe pressure falls out west or an approaching upper level system. And then in the southeastern U.S., looks like a series of boundaries. This is probably all the same air mass, and I don't really find a front until we get up into Virginia and Kentucky. And that's where we pick up the slight northerly flow and the slightly drier air. We've had MCSs working across Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and that's changed the air mass quite a bit. Cooler temperatures in that region and a lot of northerly components back in behind the warm front and outflow boundary. And the only place with a relatively undisturbed air mass is in Texas itself. Dew points are a little bit lower there, and temperatures at this hour coming up to 96 there at Stephenville and even 100 at Childress. And there's our visible satellite at this hour, early afternoon. A lot of boundaries indicated. There's obviously one right there. There's probably a few in here that are very subtle, maybe something like that, and certainly others in Florida as active as they've been the past week. Not much cumulus in Texas, and I don't see that sea breeze active. We just don't have that strong onshore flow going on today. And looking at our prospects out in the Atlantic for tropical activity, we've got Tropical Storm Josephine, 40 knots, 1005 millibars, and the track on that pretty much as what we've been expecting the past couple of days. And I'm seeing indications of recurvature for next week, so I'm not sure that's going to impact the East Coast. 5-day tropical outlook, just focused on Josephine there. So it looks pretty quiet out in the Atlantic, and they're not even bringing the storm up to hurricane strength. So I don't know. I thought they said it was going to be an active hurricane season. We're still not up to the peak, though, so maybe we just have to be patient. But I guess, it would be a blessing to not have to be worrying about destruction on top of all the mess that we've seen going on this year with other kinds of news. Let's take a look at the week ahead using the 200 millibar chart. And man, you can see that strong westerly flow across the U.S. It's like we have an upper level high across Arizona, so that's going to keep the monsoon at bay for a while. Starting to get to the tail end of monsoon season, actually. And then we have this other high along the Carolinas coast. In between, a trough. So likely as that approaches, we'll see some chances for rain going up in the southeastern U.S. over the weekend. Then running that forward into next week, that subtropical high just parks itself over the southwest deserts. So it should be hot there and kind of dry. Then we have Josephine. Looks like that's starting to enter the picture right there. And let's see what else. Yeah, another trough coming into Texas. Looks like we're starting in with some northerly flow. And let's look at our surface chart there. Yep, stormy in the Dakotas with that surface system up in there. Looks like an MCS moving across Minnesota, Iowa, and Nebraska tomorrow. Maybe some severe weather possible. And let's see here. I can see we're driving a front down into Texas, so that puts a boundary down here. This time of year, that is usually kind of a wet indicator. Yeah, see that? So this is at Sunday, and then next Monday and Tuesday, high pressure moving in, driving that boundary south. For Wednesday, weak frontal system there in Florida. Boundary still back across southwest Texas. And that may actually drive enough dry air into Texas to keep. That's probably what's happening here. A little bit too much cold air coming south. And that will actually block some of the moisture up in the Midwest, and that's probably why we're not seeing much activity in that region. Let's see how open the Gulf is over the next week. That's really the key. There's a few frames where the Gulf is open, but it's mostly moving moisture up into Mississippi, and you can see there's practically no gradient down in that area on the coast. So that blocking of the Gulf is going to interfere with storm potential. But take a look at this segment here for late next week. You can see the Gulf opens up in Texas, way down in the Rio Grande, and notice how by the weekend, thunderstorms up in Minnesota, Illinois, and the Great Lakes region. So even though the upper level conditions look favorable for a lot of interesting weather, in the south it looks like the problem is getting moisture into place. Okay, so I guess we've kind of put things into perspective there. Anyway, that's about all I got for today. Let me go ahead and get this prepared. I do want to say I know a lot of you have written in and provided some comments with that email I sent last week. I haven't gotten around to replying to a lot of them because my schedule has been kind of messed up, and it seems like everything has been on a late schedule since this pandemic started, and we're trying to fix that starting this week. So I'm getting my exercise in during the morning, and I'm working to get these videos out a little earlier and make more of the day available. So I will be replying to a lot of you over the next couple of days. Anyway, that's about all I got for today. We will see y'all tomorrow for the Friday edition. Take care and have a good one. Bye-bye.